Looking fresh off the winter meetings, nice and well rested. Hey, Ken, you're fooling the world if you haven't slept much. So let's dive right into it. Yeah, well, fooled. Your thoughts on the Soto trade, and then eventually can get into the defensive alignment for the Yankees as well.
Sure. Well, I love the trade actually for both. The Yankees we know who Juan Soto is, right? This Hall of Fame type player. It might only be 1 year, but it's going to be a heck of a year watching him and Judge back to back in the same lineup, which I presume will be the case. That will be just electric to watch. That's cool. And from a baseball fan's perspective, it doesn't matter if you like the Yankees or hate them. Just the idea of Juan Soto in Yankee Stadium, obviously, if you're a Red Sox fan, this isn't such a great thing, or anybody in AL East, but it is an exciting thought. And I actually thought the Padres did well in addition to the Yankees. The Padres were dealing with a situation where they were trading a player who was going to earn $30 million plus for 1 year and was not going to sign an extension. He's going to the open market. So to get back what they did, two pitchers who almost certainly will help them this season, and I think Thorpe will help them this season, along with Vasquez and Brito, who are guys that could fill in, and of course Michael King, and Higashioka, the backup catcher. All of that was pretty good. And you're never going to get full value. You're not going to get back what you traded for Juan Soto, but they did well. Now, the defensive question that I wrote about is the one that involves Judge going to center and how often he will play center. And one of the things I tried to stress in the column was that we speculate about these things, as I was doing in the column, but you never know how it's going to play out, which guys are going to get hurt, for how long. If Stanton is on the IL for any length of time, as he probably will be, then the DH spot opens up and they can maybe do some things to slide people around. Get Grisham into the outfield, DH Soto or Judge or Verdugo on a given day. There will be possibilities. As Eric was saying, they now have depth. At the same time, it does concern me putting Aaron Judge in the outfield when he's 6'7", 282 pounds. In center field, because it is a more taxing position. And I quoted Sean Casey from his podcast yesterday, basically saying, no, I don't want to see this. That might have been a little extreme, but there is a concern there. And the contrast I drew in the column with Mookie Betts and Bryce Harper, basically guys who are the same age, and they're moving to less taxing positions. That to me is significant. Judge is a guy who has had some injuries in his career. Some of them flukish that have nothing to do with really how he plays the game. But there is an increased risk of injury in center field. And when you have 8 years to go on a 9-year, $360 million contract and you're in your early 30s, it's not ideal. Maybe the Martian, as Scott said, comes up in the middle of the season and they have to do some other things, maybe trade Verdugo at that point. Who knows? Maybe other guys get hurt and things happen and they get other players. There's all kinds of possibilities. But for me, as for Sean Casey, there's just a concern here with playing Judge in center field on a regular basis.
Okay. So one team is looking to play someone in center. The other team is a playoff team. It's not like the Padres traded to the Yankees and the Padres were a cellar dweller for years. Like, this is a playoff team. Have the Padres done enough in what they brought back? Because you said they got the few pieces that they have to be a playoff team, because they're still trying to make the playoffs. And if so, are they moving a platinum glove winner from right field over to center field? The same exact issue that we have with Judge moving from right field, to me, a gold glove winner in right field, to center field. So the Padres are the other half of this. Are they going to be able to do enough, or have they done enough to be a playoff team?
They haven't done enough yet. There's no question about that. And keep in mind who they lost. All of those starting pitchers: Snell, Wacha, Lugo, Nick Martinez from the bullpen, Hader, Luis Garcia. That's 6 guys who I believe threw about 500 innings last year. And a lot of them were quality innings. So when you get back Michael King and Thorpe, who hasn't even pitched in the majors yet, and 2 other guys who are probably back-end guys at best, you haven't solved the problem. I don't expect that they're going to necessarily solve the problem in one off season. And I've talked about this. We wrote about this in The Athletic. This team has financial issues. They had to move the salary to do some other things. There were reports overnight about them being interested in Jung-Hoo Lee, Korean outfielder. Maybe that's a move they make, but they're still going to need pitching. And part of the motivation for this trade was not only to get the pitchers that they acquired from the Yankees, but also to create payroll flexibility to maybe go out and do some other things in free agency. So this is something that, to me, and I said this on the show, if I recall, a week ago, was inevitable. They had to trade Soto for two reasons: financial reasons and to help fix their pitching staff, and they took a step toward that with this deal.
And before we move on from this deal, Ken, I'll mix in two fan questions that are in the same range here. Jake said, obviously, Yamamoto is the main focus, but are the Yanks done looking for more bats? And Matthew said, if Yamamoto doesn't land with the Yankees, who do they pivot to and go get? They still need 1 to 2 starters with Nestor Cortez, Carlos Rodon, fifth starters, all question marks in his mind compared to obviously last year when it was like Cole and then until Michael King at the end of the season.
Right. Yamamoto certainly is a target. I don't know that you can count on Yamamoto with Steve Cohen in the mix and other teams as well. And we don't know his desires necessarily, but the Yankees won't necessarily get outbid, but they might by Cohen. The fact of the matter is they have a lot of competition there. And if they don't get him, do they then make another trade? I don't know if they can make a third trade after Verdugo and Soto to deplete their farm system further to get one of the starters that is available. The free agents out there, Blake Snell, obviously, Jordan Montgomery, former Yankee, but it's not a particularly deep, high-end group. And there will be competition for those pitchers as well. And there are questions about those pitchers, as there are for any free agent as well. So I'm not sure exactly what they do if they don't get Yamamoto. And it almost seems to me, guys, like just as the Yankees needed Soto and there was no alternative, Yamamoto is almost in that same category for them. And maybe he prefers the Yankees and their history to the Mets. The money's going to be there probably either way. But it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. And as far as adding further position players, I'm not sure they need to do much more along those lines. Third base is, I guess, a question for them next year. But they've got LeMahieu. They've got Rizzo back. They've got Glaber still at second, Volpe at short. I don't know that they really need anything more than really depth.
I want to move on to Eduardo Rodriguez. I mean, what a great pickup this was for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Kind of solidifies the 5 guys that they look like they're going to go moving forward. Do you see anything else with the Diamondbacks moving forward, and do you like this trade?
I like this signing, yes. Although Eduardo Rodriguez has had some issues off the field that give me some pause, quite frankly. And I would expect that Mike Hazen, because of his history with Eduardo Rodriguez going back to their days together in Boston, would have vetted that thoroughly. But the idea of Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, and Eduardo Rodriguez at the top of the rotation, that is intriguing. And that is a pretty special threesome right there. You've got, of course, Kelly and Gallen were one of the better duos in the majors last year. If Eduardo Rodriguez gets back to who he was at his best, they have something really special. Now, as for what else they might do, it seemed to me their bigger priority even was a bat and a right-handed bat to go into their mix and balance out their lineup. They addressed third base with Suarez, but they need one more bat, and they're looking for that right now.
Let me dive in on the Reds here too. I've been talking with the guys about this beforehand. The Candelario signing, to me, with all the infielders they have, it was very confusing. Where are they going to put everybody? What do you think the Reds are doing? Because they need pitching, and right now, the 3 years, 45 of Candelario. I mean, great, good for him, but at the same time, I didn't think they need another infielder. Did you?
No, but the way they explained it, or will explain it, is that with the addition of Candelario, they moved Steer to the outfield. They did need an outfielder, and now Spencer Steer can be in the outfield. They do have what appears to be 6 infielders for 4 spots. Keep in mind, though, Votto is retired, and you have the DH, so it's kind of 6 infielders for 5 spots. And I'm talking about Matt McClain and Dela Cruz and Marte and Jonathan India and Christian Encarnacio Strand. It's quite a group. I'm missing somebody there, but there's one more. They have depth now. They haven't had depth in the past, and that has bothered them, and it's been a problem for them at times. So while obviously all of us are going to think the move is to trade one of those guys, probably Encarnacion Strand or India, for a starting pitcher. I'm not totally convinced the Reds will do it. They're going to have to get the right deal because they like, especially, De La Cruz, McClain, and Marte. Those guys they view as potential stars. At the same time, they're going to have some things to figure out here, and if they're not going to be able to spend on the pitching market for free agent pitchers, with Eduardo Rodriguez getting $20 million a year last night, then a trade becomes that much more logical for them.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the next steps here and the messages that were just sent. So I'm wondering if they said, well, we're not going to be able to play at the top of the starting pitching free agent market. Okay, I didn't necessarily expect that. 2, do they feel like the asking price for players like Tyler Glasnow and Dylan Cease were getting too high and they were going to spend money elsewhere, right? I mean, Glasnow's $25 million, Candelario 15 a year here. And then 3, you did have Nick Krall coming out saying that they did not plan on trading Jonathan India. He said that the other day. He doesn't have to say that. He could just say, hey, listen, we talked to teams about everybody. So in my mind, we're doing the math again, like you said, there's just too many players for not enough spots. So Candelario is going to play. They just gave him a lot of money. I'm certainly confused about this one in my mind. If I got $45 million extra, I'm a lower market team. I'm calling up some of those guys and seeing if they want contract extensions too, so I can make sure this is going to be sustained success for Cincinnati.
They got outbid for Sonny Gray, so that's one. And for the top guys, they're just not going to be in position to do that in their minds. Now, maybe we can argue they have the money. They just don't want to spend the money. This is the age-old question with any team. They're all rich, but that's their choice. They're a lower revenue team. They're not going in that direction. I'm with you, Scott. I believe, too, that a trade would be quite obvious here, but they have had depth problems in the past. And when Nick Krall says that about Jonathan India, he doesn't want to trade any of his guys. He wants them all. He likes them all. And India is a leader on that team, kind of the glue in some ways, and I'm sure he would be concerned about that. But the addition of Candelario adds leadership and perhaps gives them, in that regard, almost a replacement for India and a guy who is really well thought of with Candelario in the game. Candelario is highly respected, and he will be particularly good for their young Latin players. So I'm with you, Scott. I still see a trade, but the other factor here, and I wanted to mention this. So they're playing, obviously, to contend in 24 in a weak division, and they showed that they could do that last season with these guys just really coming to the big leagues. But they're really focused on 25 and beyond. So do you go trade for a one-year guy like Tyler Glasnow or Corbin Burns, not that he would go in the division? No, you don't do that. Maybe you do Dylan Cease, but not if it's going to cost you Marte, who you think maybe can be a star. So this is the spot they're in, and maybe the best solution here is for them to get one of the mid-level starters. I would say someone like a Giolito, just as an example. Giolito's going to cost money too, and maybe he'll be too rich for them, but that might be the way that they choose to go.
All right, on Fair Territory, you kind of gave us a glimpse into the Craig Counsell thing where you had heard something. You're not sure if I'm going to report it or not. I'm interested in how all of this stuff goes down in the sense of like you hear something and then you're like, well, I'm not going to go yet with it because ultimately I want to know what the next chip to fall is. What is the next rumbling that you're hearing, a signing, a trade, something final that is next down the line for us here?
Well, Eric, we're all waiting for Ohtani. That's the biggest one, of course. I don't have anything percolating in my head at this moment, and if I did, I would put it out there. So these things are reported in real time now better than they ever have been. It's a race to be first, and sometimes, to me, it's a little counterproductive. It's a race that you can win, but you're only going to win by 1 minute or two, and I kind of tend to get more satisfaction out of writing things or reporting things that have more staying power, so to speak. But at the same time, there's a lot of action right now, and a lot of us are making a lot of calls and sending out a lot of texts trying to figure out what's going on because it is so fascinating to fans, and it's fascinating to all of us who are involved in the game and covering the game and love the game. So it's a fun time of year. It wasn't so fun the first 3 days in Nashville, and I wrote a column about that, and some people got upset saying, Ken, we don't care if you're having fun. guys, I'm doing the same thing regardless of whether stuff is happening or not. I'm still trying to chase stories and report. That wasn't the point of the column. The point of the column was baseball needs to get more like the other sports and get some kind of deadline or deadlines in place so you can spur action and you can create greater interest in the hot stove league, which is supposed to be something that drums up business. And I'm not going to lecture people about reader comprehension, but there are times I kind of feel like it. Read it again if you didn't get it the first time.
You're spot on, Ken. And let me tell you, some responses have pissed me off because even people saying like, it's not Ken's job to be the promoter of the sport. You're right. He covers the sport, but he can offer ideas for the sport. Like, it's ridiculous. You're allowed to be a columnist. You're not just I just have to report the trades. Like, if you've followed Ken for years, you know what's going on. So I'll add to that here because we're going to get into this later. Not sure if you saw, for example, J.J. Watt come out and say, hey, if we talk too much about ourselves, I'm paraphrasing here, then you don't like it. And now Ohtani's secrecy, you don't like it. So in my mind, he's in the NFL. Rodgers, Kelsey, etc. They breathe, they blink. It's a story. Baseball's not the NFL right now. And also, it's not like we have all of those cases of what he's talking about. We don't have the LeBron decision case. We've never had that. We don't even have, yesterday, Dylan Harper, who's like the top college basketball recruit, announces he's going to Rutgers and has a whole thing about it. And it was awesome. It was cool. So no one's expecting Ohtani to do that or say that. And tell me if I'm kind of misrepresenting you, but I think that there are things getting lost in translation here where people have to understand we're not criticizing Ohtani's timing. We're not criticizing even Ohtani's secrecy on his own end. My personal issue is him and or his camp telling teams you can't say shit and that becoming a story, even with the Dodgers having a little bit of internal discussions about what they're allowed to say. I think that's where we've gotten too far. What do you think?
From what I understand, Ohtani's camp basically told teams, we just prefer you to be discreet. I can't imagine that they actually threatened them and said, we're not going to take your money if you say something publicly. But the request was, be discreet. That's our preference. Don't say anything. Now, what Dave Roberts said the other day, he's our top priority. We met with him. We talked with him for 3 hours. It was good. How that can bother anybody in the Ohtani camp is beyond me. And the fact that the Dodgers got upset with Roberts, seemingly, the front office, it was absurd. And it has gone to a level of absurdity with the privacy that is just not necessary. It's not going to matter. People are not going to care once he signs. It really doesn't affect much at all. But I will say this. He's going to get a monster contract, a record contract. It's going to be $500 million, $600 million, whatever it's going to be. That person who gets that contract, and frankly, that person who already is a two-time unanimous MVP, in my opinion, he has a responsibility to his sport to be out there, to not necessarily promote himself, but to be part of the mix. And look at other sports, like you just mentioned, some football players. You mentioned LeBron James. You can talk about him and what he brings to the NBA, Steph Curry. These guys recognize who they are within their sports. Now, I know Ohtani comes from Japan. It's a different culture. I get all that and respect it, of course. But at the same time, there is some of that. And fans who tell me just leave them alone, well, fans are getting shortchanged when players do not in any way interact and just kind of sit there. We just love them to perform. Yes, we love all that, but this is an entertainment industry. It's more than that. And my friend from The Athletic, Andy McCullough, put it really well. He's talked about this on his podcast. He said, listen, Ohtani's going to get this money not just because he can hit and because he can pitch. He's going to get this money because he's part of an $11 billion entertainment industry. Not all players have to be the same. They don't all have to be media hounds or whatever you want to call them. But there is a certain responsibility that comes with that stardom, with that status as a public figure. Simple as that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm with you, Ken. So we love baseball and we want it to be talked about. We want it to have lasting power and
That's
be popular
the whole point.
With the younger generation. Yeah. That's it. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate you. Looking forward to more action coming up.